Hi everybody, starting in a few minutes. Let me know where you're from. Be great if someone can let me know you can actually hear me too. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Just starting about a minute 40. Just maybe let me know in the comments where you're from. Well, evening guys. I say guys, even though I do know there are some ladies joining us, but welcome to Men Navigating Everything. For those of you who are on tonight or watching this on YouTube later, let me just give you a few seconds on me. If you don't know me, my name is Brett Ullman. I come from a town called Ajax. Ajax is 45 minutes east of the city of Toronto. In Ontario, Canada. It's nice that we have some Americans, people from different provinces here as well. My background is education. I was trained for high school, but I spent my career teaching elementary school students in the, inner city Toronto. I did that for 9 years, and then I left that. I think it's 16 years now. It might be 15, but this is my full-time job. I usually say I travel and speak. COVID has rocked that a little bit, so I do a lot more of Zoom, and this is actually an app called eCam. But I travel and speak on current issues. This is my newest talk called Men Navigating Everything. Probably my biggest two talks are actually my talk called Parenting Navigating Everything and my talk on mental health called Hope for the Walking Wounded. And I also speak on dating, pornography, like addictions, sexuality as well. And I do have a talk called Media, Faith, and Culture. All the fun stuff. I'm married with 2 kids. My wife's name is Dawn. She's a nurse, and I have 2 kids. Zoe is in first year university. If you know Ontario, she's in a school called Western. She's actually at residence, which has been an interesting thing during COVID. And my son Ben is in grade 12, so he's getting acceptances for universities, and will be heading off to that next year. So I'm going to switch for tonight's presentation to just another window so you can see what I'm talking about, but you can still see me as well. This is my newest talk, and I'm enjoying this. And I say tonight's talk with an open hand to you, meaning if you have some thoughts, things I should add, things I should change, that's what I get to do as a speaker. I do this for men's breakfast, men's groups ongoing, and if this is something you'd love for your church or organization, I would love to do one another day as well. So first off, I kind of want to explain how I got here. Actually before COVID, I began to look at, so my new book was finished. I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do next, and I thought I'm going to actually use analytics. So I went on Google, and I went on my Google Analytics, and I went on my analytics on my YouTube channel, and I was floored. Look at the top searches here. How to be a better husband, how to be a good husband, how to be a better husband and father, being a better husband, which isn't a question, but it's a search term, and how to be a better father. And then my most watched videos. Now, again, I think men is bigger than just being a better husband or father. So you take, is masturbation a sin? So we have sex, how to be a better father, husband and boyfriend, 10 ways to be a better husband. The truth is, 9 of my top 10 videos were like directly linked to how to be a man. And so I kind of thought to myself, well, I think this is one of those things that we can look at, having a conversation for men. I have an older conversation for men called the Man Talk. You can find that on YouTube. So what is the goal tonight? The goal tonight is to keep moving forward. I love Alan Watts, who once said, you're under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. I love that. I just think it's I use this quite a lot. Like, my thoughts can change, my views can change, my habits can change. But what I want to give tonight is some kind of like, let's call it crystal clear focus on how to move forward with practical application, helping you navigate being a better man, husband, father, boyfriend, the list goes on. And I just say better fathers, better husbands. So whether we're going from bad to good, or to quote the book by Jim Collins, as many of you know, from good to great. There is a great quote by Nikki Blaze Stone that says, I've been becoming increasingly convinced that an underlying pandemic in our nation right now is a severe, crippling inability to think critically and thoroughly. I do think we need to be able to think critically about all aspects of our lives and see if there's ways that we can kind of journey better in those things. Now, with that being said, when I began to create a talk again for men and I was researching online, it was interesting to me how fragile people think men are. People kept writing me and saying, Brett, you can't bash men. And I'm like, I didn't say I was going to bash men. I said I want to have a talk to help men be better, because it's literally what men are searching. I am not here to bash men. That's a pinata if you don't know the image there. I'm not. But I'm also not going to give everyone a trophy. Like, statistics aren't great for men today. If you look through all of the stats, men are not doing great today. Doesn't mean you're not doing great, but statistically, we have a lot of things we need to work on. There has to be a way of channeling men in a way we can move forward. Not bashing and not having indifference in the middle, but somewhere just kind of heading and moving forward. I use the analogy in my mental health talk of some of us have made the whole our home, kind of for mental health, and you can't get out. I have 2 puppies on either side of me. I can hear one barking, and I have an English bulldog, and my whole family's out. So if Bailey bashes her face in, which is how she kind of comes through a door, I will show you my dog, but I don't think it's her. Anyways, the idea of making your home, and I think that we need to kind of think in all aspects, how can we look at getting better? Now, why should we get better? One would be our faith. One day we'll be in heaven with Jesus, but today we live in this world, and we're called to so much more than just surviving each day. So our faith, our family, and I think our families deserve the best of us, the best versions of us, and also for the society around us. Love God, love others. How do we actually do that? So I did what I do. I am a ferocious reader. I love reading. I read usually a book minimum per week. And so I began to read. And I began to read all the books in our Christian kind of subculture that we give to men. And I'm going to be honest, I did not like most of them. Most were like, head off into the forest and shoot something. And I'm like, I don't have a gun, and I don't hunt. And it was just a lot of disconnect for me. And so I actually began to do something different. I began to read books on habits. And I don't know where this switched. I was kind of reading something other than books on men, and I began to read these. All the ones across the top are books on habits. And I'm going to tell you in a minute where you can find these books. I have them all listed for you. And then I headed onto the bottom, Brené Brown, who I just love. She's a phenomenal writer. More books on leadership. I went back to Freakonomics from many, many years ago, looking at maybe there's reasons why we as men aren't getting better. I read all of Malcolm Gladwell's books again, and I just really enjoy his, let's call it view, like even outliers. I think, how can we be outliers as Christian men, as men? And after going through all of these things, I realized that I think habits are the foundation. Now, let me just say, every book I'm going to give you tonight is all listed, and I actually put that into the chat on a new Amazon page. I was accepted a number of weeks ago, I don't like this term, but to the Amazon influencers page, which means I can put up my own, they call it a shop, but you can see right at the top, and I don't know where it is on the actual page anymore, but every single book that I promote tonight and tell you will all be there. As a side note, if you ever buy those, if you're going to buy them anyways, a little bit comes back to the charity I run and helps us. So there is a quote that I've heard a few times, but it's in a book called Upstream. And this is, I'm going to paraphrase another version of it, which I really like. It was kind of this idea that there's a bunch of people down by a river one day, and they see this baby floating down, like drowning, and they rush in and they grab this kid. And the next day, there's a few babies coming down. They all rush in and grab these babies. And the third day, there's more babies. But one of the guys does not head off into the river. He actually starts like moving, like walking like quickly upstream. And someone says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm going to go find whoever's throwing the babies in the river and punch him in the face." Now, the analogy, it's kind of amusing. It's very morose with babies in the river. But the point is, we need to in life look upstream sometimes. I think too often, especially in our Christian church world, we are looking at dealing with the immediate fix. And we need to look at kind of like if the house is on fire, why don't we look at how the house got on fire? Wouldn't it be better if we didn't have to deal with kids who are estranged from us as dads? Wouldn't it be better if we didn't have to deal with spouses who are separated or divorced from us? Friends who no longer talk to us, a God who seems distant, a body that is unhealthy, an addiction that is crushing us and destroying our world, and a loneliness that is destroying us from the inside out. And I think we really need to look at the idea of looking upstream in all aspects of life. In the book Upstream, Dan Heath says, every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. These are one of the, I call these stop quotes. They're quotes that I sit back and I go, wow, like, every system in my life, Brett Ullman's life, is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. There's a book that I read many years ago called Sacred Cows Make the Best Burgers. Interesting kind of joke, but we're going to challenge our systems today. In the book Atomic Habits, they say you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. I mean, it's mid-February. Many of us made goals in January. Lose weight, treat our wives a certain way. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. But if we don't have systems in how to do it, we will fail. And so the question is, what are the systems in your lives? Goals are for the direction setting, but systems are the best for making actual progress. So I'm going to have a few kind of takeaways for you. I want you to read 2 books. Now, for some of you, it's no big deal. For some of you will say, I haven't read 2 books in years. And you can go buy the audiobook and listen to it when you exercise. You can put it in your car if you take a train into work. But I'm going to encourage you to read Upstream. I think the learning in that is just so brilliant. It's good just to understand. And then I'm going to give you the choice of either Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg or Atomic Habits by James Clear. Both were really great. I probably would lean towards Atomic Habits by James Clear. As a side note, if you read these, I'd love to hear what you think. I think these are really foundational books. Now, there's a book called ADKAR. If you look at the top, it says like awareness, and there's like different it's like an acronym. But it says here, the secret to successful change lies beyond the visible and busy activities that surround change. Successful change at its core is rooted in something much simpler: how to facilitate change with one person. And that's my goal tonight. It's the reason I've been doing this kind of COVID YouTube tour is how can I look at, during a season where my speaking is lower and we're all struggling, how can we look at making change with just one person? So what I did is I made a rubric, I'm going to call it. And what I like with this is I'm a pragmatic person. I need structure for things. And as I was looking at being a better man, I created this. And I'm currently having a company right now that's going to design this into, I don't know if it's a JavaScript or what we'll call it, but it would literally be clickable. Now, each of us have 8 categories. It's 0 to 10 in each of them. Marcus Aurelius says, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be, like all these books say. Let's just be one in all these areas. Now, 2 areas here that I put in orange. Marriage, not everyone gets married. Not everyone is married. Divorce, separation, widowed. But but most people will be married in their life, and even more guys will be a dad because many people have children and aren't married. So just though I put two slivers there, just so we acknowledge that not everyone is the same with those, but we can all look at moving forward. And so what the clickable thing, and if you follow me on social media, you'll see when this comes out live, and it will be on my website and everywhere. But what I want you to do, and you could actually later go back and choose this one, or I have a number of talks on men that will have a blank one, and you could literally just fill this out at home. Spiritual health, how am I doing? 1 to 10. Marriage, how am I doing? Now, I have one other thing I want you to do, and I think this is probably the most important thing in this conversation, is I want you to put the trajectory of where you're going. Meaning, if your mental health is 5, that's okay, but are you getting better or are you getting worse? Because I think if you're a 9, getting worse is not where we want to be. We want to be looking at moving forward in all of these aspects, no matter if you're a 2 or a 9. How do we look at getting better? And so this is the cornerstone of tonight. And we're going to walk through each of these areas one by one, and there's going to be lots of takeaways for you. Now, I want to decrease your overwhelmingness, meaning just to say there's 8 categories and a bunch of stuff in them is overwhelming, and I get it. I created recently a book, and I'm going to actually switch this so I can show it to you. It is not a little book. This is a 226,000 word handbook, and you can see it is a lot of different conversations. First 6 chapters are on parenting. Last 10 chapters, though, are actually much beyond that. Mental health and it's basically a lot of the stuff we're talking about tonight. Even though it's in a book called Parenting, I wrote the last 10 chapters for anyone. And so it's something that you can use to walk through this. I'm actually just about to create a book study for that as well. I do want to create an online course where I go through each of these 8 categories kind of more in depth. But my website, which is just my name, brettallman.com, has, I think it's 1,000 or more blogs, articles, books, and the list goes on that are online. And it is basically, I always just say I'm a curator. I'm less of a blogger and more of a curator. So if you clicked on like the blog and clicked on men, you'll find everything that I find for men or mental health or all the different categories there. So let's get into this category by category. Physical health. Now, I want to give you simple, achievable to-dos in each category here as well. In the book Eat, Move, Sleep, and again, every book I show you tonight is all on that Amazon page, Tom says, you can make decisions today that will give you more energy tomorrow. The right choices over time greatly improve your odds of a long and healthy life. What a great idea. No matter how healthy you are today, you can take specific actions to have more energy and live longer. Regardless of your age, you can make better choices in the moment. Small decisions about how you eat, move, and sleep every day count way more than you can think. And so here are my 3 challenges for you. So this is what I'm doing different with this talk. I'm not going to give you the theological or the intellectual realm of why we need to do things. I want to tell you, and this is what I polled a lot of men, and they said, just tell me what to do. And so I want you to move better. And most of you would say back to me, well, how much better? And I would say, I want you to move 5% better. And you'd say, Brett, that's a joke. And I would say, yeah, so do it. 5% is a joke. You can move 5%. Think of how many steps you take a day, do 5% more. So the point is just do something. Now, when I say something, let's get practical. You can do anything. Walking is a big one, and I've actually been walking quite a lot. I walked last January through June every day, between 5 and 10 kilometers a day, all weather, everything. Actually, I have a YouTube video on that. It could be running, it could be hiking. My wife and I have been doing a lot of hiking with I know everyone's from all over, but where we are, we've been locked down now, it feels like forever. It just sort of didn't, I think we just opened up a bit today, but we hike. We try to go at least once a week into a forest somewhere and hike. Biking, going to a gym. Some of you can go to gym, some of you can't. And the last one there is really just cars. When you go grocery shopping or go to work or wherever, park the farthest spot. Why? So you gain an extra 50 or 100 steps. It's just looking at little things. Now, I'm also going to encourage you to do something, and I don't know if this is a term. I don't know if I'm making it up or not. When you have pancakes, what do? We stack them. And I want you to stack these things. Here's what I mean by that. You don't have to do one thing for parenting and one for physical health and one for mental health. Do things that encompass all of these. Going for a hike with your family. Like, I went with my wife the other day. We went for a walk. If you live near me, it's a forest called Durham Forest. We went for like an hour and a half walk. On the weekend, we went and visited my brother and sister-in-law, went for a walk in Toronto for 2.5 hours all around the beaches. So if you take your kid with you, there's parenting. But if it's just you and a spouse or a girlfriend or friend or boyfriend, like whoever, I'm saying, I don't even know who's on this call. So like whoever's here, but there's physical health, mental health, there's spiritual health. For me, being in nature, I feel close to God. It's great for your marriage, loneliness and alienation, which we will address today. I'm not going to say sexuality. It's not like you go for a walk with your wife, and I disagree with that kind of vein of thinking, but finances. My point is you can stack things. And I would say, like when my kids were probably 4 years ago, we bought a gym membership at like a gym together. And it has been a fantastic thing, kind of from grade 8, 9 onward, because we do physical stuff together. We spend time driving to and from. We are at the gym and have conversations. And so I love this idea of stacking. So number 1 is move better. And last 2, if you're thinking about the book I said earlier, move, sleep, eat, sleep better. Now, I struggle with mental health. I'll talk about that in the next one. Sleep is one of my biggest issues. And so sleep is something I work at. Every night I go up at 10 o'clock, every single night, except the nights. There are some nights I'm speaking in Vancouver at like the west coast of Canada, and I have to start at 10 o'clock, different story. But even tonight, 10 o'clock, I'll head upstairs. I read fiction from 10 to 10:30, and at 10:30, I go to the bathroom and I go to bed. And I have blackout blinds, and my clock doesn't face me, and all of these things. My room is cold, and I have a YouTube video there, 20 tips for better sleep. And eat better. Again, eat how much better? 5% better. Eat less processed foods, eat less sugar. And I like intermittent fasting is big right now. I actually don't eat from dinner until breakfast the next morning. It's just something I do almost every day of my life. Now, I don't care what diet we do, keto and all these other ones. I think the Mediterranean diet's one of the best, but let's just be honest. Eat good, healthy ranges of food. Cut down on pop and sugars and other things. And that's as simple as it is. Now, this is the only one I'm going to walk through this for. It's easy to say do this, but we have to actually walk through, do you have the ability to do it? Meaning it's great to say I'm going to lift weights. Great. Do you have a gym membership? Do you have weights in your basement or your garage? Someone says I'm going to bike. If you are a biker, you realize that during COVID for the past 11 months, you can't buy bikes. Where I live in my town, Ajax, like you can't buy a bike anywhere. Some of them are like $8,000, $10,000 you can buy, but regular bikes and regular parts, they're just gone. Do you have walking shoes? Do you have shorts? Right? Do you have socks to do things like that? And I would say plan out the night before. So before I go to bed, as soon as the spring comes, I begin walking in the morning again. I get up 6:30 and I'll be out the door. But what I do is I put like outside my room all my stuff, my shorts, my socks, like everything I'm going to wear, jacket, like my AirPods, everything that I'm going to want for my walk, because I'm not walking back in and waking up my wife. And so plan it, schedule it. And then have you ever heard like rinse, repeat, and then do it again? And these are these daily things that add up over time. It's not a week. It's not 2 weeks. Like it's months and months and months. So the Bible's filled with physical analogies. And so I encourage you to look at that physical aspect of your life. What is one thing you could do to get better in that? Number 2 is mental health. And I just would say with mental health, this is probably one of the things that often men will come up to me after a talk. And they wait until, there's no one left at my table, and they walk up and say, so you struggle with mental health? And if you don't know my history, I left teaching. I did a program called the Aero Leadership Program, finished that, and then did a master's degree at Wheaton Grad School in Chicago. And then I had a breakdown. I was traveling 275 speaking dates a year. I'm married with 2 kids. I was writing a book a year. My life was in chaos. And when you do too much for too long, something gives. And my body gave. And I've struggled since 2012 with anxiety, panic. It's still part of my life. I still struggle, still have appointments like I went to today to try to figure out what's going on. But I think mental health is one of those things that we as men don't like to admit we journey with. We're guys, we're tough. It's like, no, we're not. This facade sometimes we put up, there's many of us who journey with this, and it's an important thing to address. Now, there's a really great book by Stephen here who says this: herein lies one of the most pervasive misunderstandings regarding mental illness, that God spares this kind of pain and suffering from those with deep and abiding faith. It's one of the most damaging thing we hear in the church today is we blame people like they didn't pray enough. They didn't read their Bible enough. It's somehow their fault that they're struggling. That's, by the way, something we would never say to someone with cancer or diabetes or other long-term illnesses and different things. But we need to realize that when we have mental health struggles, it affects how we can do things. It affects how we parent. It affects our physical health, our emotional health, our spiritual health. It affects how we can go to church and worship and many things. I'm doing a conference on Saturday, and I'm going to challenge pastors to take a few things of how we walk through our church, how we speak from the pulpit, how worship leaders, I'm going to encourage not to say everyone rise, because some of us can't rise and worship. Just how do we get rid of unnecessary barriers that we put for people with mental health in our churches? Now, I'm going to simplify, and I did a live on mental health. It was my first live. I've done 3 so far. This is my 4th. I've done my parenting talk, I've done my mental health talk, and I've done my media talk. And you can go back and listen to those. But I really believe in the body, the mind, and the soul analogy. We don't know what people are going through, friends and family, loved ones. We don't know what ourselves are going through unless we get assessed. And so I think a doctor is a great person to begin with, and we can get blood work done. And I'm a big fan of what's called integrative medicine. Integrative or functional medicine is kind of doctors, naturopaths, all kinds of modalities that work together looking at helping you. Like, we are complex people, so let's learn. Exercise, I think, is paramount. I think that's just, like, we looked at physical health, like that is just, especially if you deal with mental health in any way, shape, and form, that's the where to go. Now, I'm also just going to say this. I use terms like mental health and mental illness interchangeably, and that is not the reality, even though you know what I'm saying. If mental health is on this axis, doing well, doing poorly. Mental illness is on this axis. No mental illness, like having mental illness. Mental illness is diagnosed by a professional, not you or just someone who's a friend, like a licensed therapist, counselor, psychologist, social worker, psychiatrist, these kinds of things. That's anxiety, depression, panic. Mental health. Most of us have poor mental health right now during COVID, but I can actually have okay mental health while I'm struggling with mental illness. If you Google difference between mental health and mental illness, like mental health is this resiliency that we have. It is, that kind of you push on a ball and it comes back up. It's being able to enjoy life, enjoy your work and family and take joy in things. And that's kind of the idea of mental health. Anyways, I went off on a tangent there. But exercise, sleep, go to a sleep clinic if you are struggling with sleep. Get referrals and a counselor, a therapist. Again, I should say like registered therapists, right? These are people who are qualified to do this. Get some framework for healing. Your issue might be physical. Your issue might be emotional. Now, language is so important here. I do not say your issue might be spiritual, and here's why. It is unbelievably uncommon that your answer to your mental illness and mental health struggles are faith-based. Now, why do I have it in here? Because God says you will have trouble in this world, but he says, I will be with you in that trouble. So as we journey, by the way, as we journey to get better or not, this idea that everyone gets better is also not true. But the reality is God is with us. And so our faith is such a huge thing to build while we journey in these mental health realms. And there's work for us to do here. My psychologist once said to me, where there is resistance, there is work. And it's been a line I've never forgotten since, because wherever in my life there's a bit of resistance in my heart, my soul, my spirit, it's like that's where I need some work. So we've looked at physical health, we've looked at mental health, and spiritual health. I think those three, that's like a trifecta of like the foundation of who we are. But spiritual health, again, I love this idea that this is like a puzzle. There's lots of parts to our spiritual faith. I would encourage you to read. And I think reading scriptures is one of these paramount things. But here's the truth. We all struggle with this. Many of us do. Some struggle. Some people tell me they love to read their scriptures. And other ones, like people like me and other pastors and leaders, we find it hard to read our Bible and not say, oh, this preaches, this teaches, I can use this in my talk. How do we just be molded by scriptures? I use an app called Read Scripture, and I really like it. It's on my iPad. It actually gives me these like hand-drawn cartoons kind of, and it sounds cheesy. It's not. Like I'm reading the Old Testament right now, so I'm going through the book of Jeremiah. big book, and it gives you the overarching narrative of the book. Here's how habits work. Usually people say 3 chapters, 5 chapters a day. Read one. Just read one. If all you have to do is read one chapter, the truth is, if you just open your Bible and begin, usually we'll spend a bit of time, but if you read one chapter a day, just think of how many you would read in a year. That's like with any book. If you read 5 pages of a normal book, you're going to read 2-3 books a year. Pray, worship, these are spiritual disciplines, and I think books by Dallas Willard, Richard Foster. Richard Foster's son's name's Nathan Foster, and he has a great book called, The Making of an Ordinary Saint. But submission, solitude, and silence, simplicity, fasting, these are the things I'm assuming you go through in your churches. And these are the things that help build our faith. And so you can stack these things as well. When I go for a walk, for me, it is my time of worship. Whether I have music on or not, there's something about just being in nature where I feel close to God. What was the book I read with that? Gary Thomas, Spiritual Pathways, just saying that we're all very different. So I want you to do all those things. And we're on number 4, marriage. And I again, some of you are not married, but I'm going to say very simply, I want you to look at 3 ways that you can be a better husband. That's it. Are there many? Yes, there's books and books on this, but just 3 ways. And we're not talking about parenting here, because you actually can be a better husband by actually being a better father as well. But the first I would say is your relationship. The 5 love languages, this is a version called For Men. There's actually one, the main one, called the 5 love languages. If you haven't read this, please do. This talks about how your wife needs to be loved, and I tell you, your friends and family and everyone else needs to be loved, how they can receive love. There's physical intimacy, yes, but it's physical touch, and then there's words of affirmation, all these kinds of things, and each of us are different. And you should know what you need and what your spouse and other people need, and know what your kids need. And this is a great book. There's 2 for if you're a parent. 5 love languages of teenagers and 5 love languages of children. The marriage course by Alpha is online, and I haven't done it. I'm supposed to do it. I was supposed to, and I had a bunch of bookings. I couldn't do it on the night my church was doing it, but I would encourage you to find it online. Now, household management is an interesting line, and it's the one that I get pushback on more than anything else. I would just say this, guys, you are not an assistant in your home. You are not a helper with your kids, and you do not babysit so your wife can go out. It is not heroic when you do dishes or vacuum, and you do not help your wife with dinner. Hopefully you're seeing the language here, right? We're not an assistant in our home. We are a partner, and I want us to be better partners. The book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky, not a faith-based book, rocked my world this year. She talks about the term emotional labor. There's actually a book, and I actually bought this a number of months ago. These are actually playing cards. And each of them have all kinds of things that are based kind of around your house. Now, here's the problem. Most times I talk to men say, well, we do, we cook sometimes, or we do the dishes sometimes, but we do snow and we fix things. And the truth is, it's so much more than that. Let me give you an example. It was a few weeks ago. It was my father's birthday. My father's birthday. I came downstairs and my wife said, sign your dad's birthday card. I don't remember the date. It's somewhere it's on my calendar, but I didn't remember. I didn't remember to buy a card. My wife told me, it's your dad's birthday, sign the card. That's emotional labor. That my wife has that knowledge to remember those things, and I don't even worry about it. They say the same when you pack up to go on a vacation or away. Your wife does more work. The truth is, there are no studies that say we have the same emotional labor going on in our homes. And so here's all I'm saying. Is there a chance that we could be better? Just better. I am not saying we're all bad as men, but is there a chance we can be better? We all can. I can. You can. And I would encourage you to read this. If you were to start to read a book tonight, I would start with that. And the cards are ones you can sit down and kind of divvy out. And then I would encourage you to actually divvy up some of the cards to your children as well. Because the idea is if we give my kids their bathroom, the card that's cleaning their bathroom, we don't think about it anymore. I don't have the emotional labor of did you do it? And then sexual intimacy. And I think I think we have an unbelievably dysfunctional way where we talk about this in the church. I mean, purity culture is another conversation in of itself, but we talk about it very little when kids are young. In high school, we as youth groups, we do some conversations. Young adults have very little, if there's a young adults group. And then we get married and we say, now, you're free to be sexually intimate with your spouse. And then we never talk about it again. There's so much dysfunction. It is so much, it's just about the man and not pleasure for both people. There's all these conversations we have to have. And I'm going to give you two sites. One is The Bare Marriage by Sheila Ray Gregoire. You'll also find it on To Love, Honor, and Vacuum. She has a brand new book coming out called The Great Sex Rescue. And it's going to be an interesting thing to see because she is really challenging some of the narratives that we have in our Christian culture today. I would encourage you to pick it up. It is actually in that list of books online. And Uncovering Intimacy as well, looking at how do we have better intimacy. I think these are a good place to start. And you realize there's a lot more that we can do. So parenting, and I mean, parenting, my book is literally parenting. And the first 6 chapters are looking at how do we have good relationships with our kids. The truth is, I'm going to give you 3 things here. I'm going to put them all up. Each of these are YouTube videos, and I'm just giving you a couple of things that you can start with. One that's so foundational is to realize that what you want is you don't want your authority to be positional. You want it to be relational. So if you think of a chart, and go back to this for a sec. If you think of a chart and you were born with positional influence and it goes down. Right? If you have a baby, you just say, like if you're at a talk like this tonight, and you're like, I hate this guy. You just pick up your kid and off you go. You have 0 relational influence, but it grows. That is what you want with your children. Like positional influence wanes. You want to have this relational influence with your kids. The positional influence reigns. And so this is where the first 6 chapters of my book talk about how do we create rich relationships with our kids. What parenting styles do we do? What is discipline? It's about teaching, not punishment. Family dinners is an easy one. Eat together as much as humanly possible. Father says to me after one of my talks during COVID, he says, you know what's really the most revolutionary thing about your talk tonight? I'm like, oh, I'd love to hear. And he goes, family dinners. So what do you mean? He goes, well, we have 3 teenagers. We don't ever eat together except for occasions, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. So he said, we just put all the food out and everyone just grabs it and goes to their own rooms and put like watches on whatever the device. And my wife and I put out our TV tables and watch the news. There's a quote that talks about how family dinners, there's something protective about them. It's such an interesting line, right? There's a collecting ritual. There's something important about dinners. Eat together and then ask good questions during that. And I would encourage you all to have a family meeting. Now, right now, I would say maybe you should do check-ins every few weeks to see how people are doing, depending how old your kids are. This is a rough time for everyone. There's a lot of low mental health, not growing mental illness, but low mental health right now. Now, my worry with long-term mental health struggles is that we begin to get anxiety disorders and others. But family meetings we have every August before the new year sets in. Finances, and this is one that is not just about, like often in the church world, it's like, how much do you give? And I would say, I don't disagree with that, but I think there's a larger construct that we need to look at. And I like the idea of earn more, save more, give more. Often in the church, we talk about, we have things on how to budget and different things. We don't talk often about how to earn more. And I always say to people, there are jobs that you can do, and there's always courses and things you should be doing to look at how can you move up in whatever company, whatever place you're at. This is college, university, apprenticeships, right? All jobs that people have gone into. How do you earn more? Dave Ramsey, and I know he's kind of gotten cancel culture is interesting these days, but he's had a bad rap for a few things he said recently. But the truth is, the idea of looking at how do we pay off mortgages and have more money. I always just say to people, I'd love to have donations of just the interest people give on their credit cards every month to Bank of Montreal and other places. We waste a lot of money. Have family budgets, so earn more, and then I want you to save more. Save for retirements, for your kids' education. As a side note, with one daughter in university and a second who will be going to university, I would encourage you to be very upfront with your kids about what you've saved or not. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong here. My wife and I saved enough so that our kids could have X amount of money per year, but we let them know that. And we had a spreadsheet we worked out a number of years ago, about grade 9 or 10, so that they could see if they went away for school, if they stayed home for school, how much they'd have to save. But it was all up front, and I've talked to too many teens who have no idea. They don't know about money at all. And I would just say this is where we teach kids about money. And so earn, save, and then why? Like, why do we earn more? So we can give more. Give to churches. I mean, the average Christian, they say, gives 2% of their income to the church. I don't think 10's biblical as a side note. I think it's a good base, but the truth is 2 is not much. There are camps that are struggling, and I would say if you can make a donation to a camp, as they weren't able to have people last summer and are going to have lower numbers this summer, please do. Lots of organizations that are in need these days. So I think that's a really simple thing. What could you do to earn more? And then how do you save more? And then how do you give more? Now, sex and sexuality. We talked about physical intimacy kind of in our marriages before. I just think this is another, I use the term trifecta. There's so much here. We as parents need to help our kids get a biblical worldview of healthy sexuality. And even in what I say, a biblical worldview comes from, like, I'm coming from a Caucasian, like, Western worldview. Like, each of our things have to be challenged a bit to make sure that we're not just accepting whatever worldview is the worldview of the day or where you're at in the world. But we do need to help our kids in this conversation. And so I have a talk. These are all on YouTube. If you have Right Now Media, they're on Right Now Media too. But the sex talk is made for you as a parent to begin to make these conversations more the common and not the uncommon. I have a talk on pornography. And the truth is, I'm actually doing this one. Is it next? I have a slide coming up. But this is in 2 weeks from now. I think it's my porn talk I'm actually doing next. And then dating. Dating and porn are the 2 last ones. These are ones for your students and I'd say grade 7 and up, and for you as adults if you're interested as well, especially for porn. There is nothing graphic about the porn talk. We know we live in a pornified culture. The question is, how do we get better at it? Like, that sounded weird. How do we get better at not having porn in our lives? And I think this is something that too many of us, especially as men, have accepted as it's just normal we struggle with porn. No, it is not. And it is not your battle forever that you will just have to, like, you can overcome these things. I think we just too often play the victim. And dating is something we need to encourage our kids to do at certain ages. Kids are not dating anymore. Young adult pastors are having me in to challenge and ask their kids to date. And I think purity culture has done a lot of that. You know, if you go for a coffee with someone, I guess you're going to get married. Like, that's just the weirdest philosophies. If you've done anything sexual, you're broken forever. Anyways, this is a talk called Dating for Life, the questions. Looking at the questions we need to walk through before, while we're dating. Now, the last section tonight, and I admit this is the smallest talk of any of them that I do, and it's kind of on purpose, but loneliness. Now, some of this has to do with how society has changed. Meaning, I read a book, what was it called? Bowling Alone, and I forget the author. It was a thick, big book, but it was looking at how the changes happened. Like, after World War II, there was this big push on, like, bowling clubs and other clubs and scouts and all of these things as we all got back into things. But today, less and less we do things. We don't go to the bank anymore and stand in line and chat with people and walk up to the teller who you know and chat. We go to a machine or a drive-in bank, or if you're like me, we just take a picture of a check and send it in. We don't go out to a restaurant anymore where we would drive and meet with family and friends and loved ones and sit and chat for hours. We Uber Eats and skip the dishes and just bring it all in, and we have less contact again. Even school, I'm just about to start a master's in counseling psychology, which will be 100% online. Now, for me right now, I already have done a master's, so I'm okay being online, but some people are only online with school, with work. Even me, I when I was a teacher, I had a staff around me and people. I now work I live in this room most of my life. I need to make sure that each week I'm calling friends and saying, hey, let's go for a walk. And no matter how locked down you are, you can walk with someone outside. But loneliness is becoming one of the biggest issues. When I wrote my book, Parenting, Navigating Everything, the last chapter is actually on loneliness. It was fascinating how many times as I was researching, so pornography, And people talked about being lonely in their sin as it separated them from others, and lonely from God, like it separated them from God. When I was talking about parenting with young children, especially young moms talk about how it's the loneliest season of their life. When you're up breastfeeding at 2 a.m, just the loneliness when you're home with kids and sleep deprivation and maybe postpartum there as well. And the same is for a lot of the guys. The loneliness that we just have as men, because most of us just work and then we come home and it's family and we don't have a lot of friends we hang out with. There was a study that says the average man has less than one friend, which sounds like you just cut someone off here, but you understand it means some men have no friends. People you can sit with and they'll ask you, how are you? And you can share and actually walk through things in life. So how do you combat loneliness? I want you to gain connection anywhere you can. And I would say with mental health especially, you need connection. I'm not saying someone just to blah, and here's how bad I'm feeling, but it's good to be with people. Church. It's interesting how many people say that going to church has been some of the loneliest times for them. And we need to find a way, because some things aren't working in church. If people can walk into our building and walk out and no one speaks to them, are we living out the church? What has to be changed so that we can actually do something other than the stand and shake hands with someone for 8 seconds in the middle of a service? How do we, after a service, not run to see our best friend, but turn to the person beside you and say, I haven't seen you before. My name's so-and-so. This is where we need to do small groups and things. We talked about pornography, dating. So many students I find are dating because they're looking for unconditional love and acceptance, which is what parents can give. That's what's called attachment parenting. A kid's attached to us and then they attach to their peers. But there's a lot of lonely people in dating. Social media. They say today that students are some of the loneliest people in the world. The truth is, they say loneliness is men 40 to 60 roughly. And then a few years ago, we began to see junior high and senior high students. And you're like, how are you lonely? You have 6,000 friends on social media. But friends on social media don't mean a lot. New technologies, be careful. There are things that I think we should, phones in bed here. Even from an intimacy standpoint, I don't believe TVs should be in our rooms for anyone, adults or kids. I think we should have less blue light. And so if you have an iPhone or other things, we can turn all of these on. There's the light that changes. So at dusk till dawn or whatever, it changes to yellow to blue. But even looking at new technologies that come in our homes, if something comes into our home, how will it change things? And just to be aware of that. I think The Social Dilemma is an interesting film to watch on Netflix. And if you do watch that, I think the answer to that, I have 9 videos on YouTube called How to Have a Better Relationship with Your Phone. I made it well before Netflix brought this series out. But it's just, how do we have a better relationship with our phones today? Communication. Can we learn, if you and I have differing views on something, you and I are still brothers in Christ. This idea that you and I have a differing view on something, and suddenly we're not even Christians anymore. In marriage, they polled thousands of Christians, women who were divorced, and they said the loneliest times in their marriage, in their life, was the times they were married. That has to change. That's just not okay. And those are things that are changeable, and I would encourage us to gain connection anywhere. Do you want a takeaway? How are you going to gain connection in the next 2 days? You're going to Skype or Zoom a friend, and I would say if you can, if you're in a lockdown place, go stand on their doorstep and bring them an iced coffee. We can still see people. It's just maybe it might be distancing or for a walk. So, where do you go from here? And I would say, do anything, literally anything to move forward. And I might suggest beginning buying that book Upstream. I think it's a great beginning, or the book Atomic Habits. The goal would be to take these 8 categories and look at how first I think we look at the trajectories, making sure we're at least open to saying, how can I get better in it? And then looking at how can we move forward to being great in all of these categories. I said at the beginning, I want to decrease your overwhelmingness. Someone asked me, why do you have a slide like this twice? I said, I do this now because I have a lot. Often I get called a fire hose. There's a lot of info in my talks. I get that. But the truth is this. I know there's a lot in my talks, but there's Home Depot. What's their motto, right? You can do it. We can help. You can do it. We can help. But I want to give you the resources for some of these things. And so whether it's the book, the online course, which will be coming, I do have an online course for my Navigating Everything. I have a 6-part series, both on Right Now Media and on my, if you go on my website, it's on my Thinkific page. And there's a study guide that's almost finished for that already. Again, all the books are there. I encourage you to start reading. And so I'm actually beginning, I forget which day of the week I'm going to start. I'm going to start giving you like a weekly book, just a challenge to read. And for those of you who commute to work, it's the easiest thing. Just do Audible and just start doing audiobooks on an ongoing basis. Ram Dass once said this: start from where you are, not where you wish you were. The work you are doing becomes your path. Isn't that awesome? Like, it's such a simplistic line, but something that's just so true and so real. This is how we begin to move forward. And so as we end, this is my last slide, I would just say, I want you to do something today. Now, what you do, I don't care. And the truth is, each of you are different. There's some of you tonight, and in this talk, each of those sections, I'd say one of them, you kind of went, oh yeah. For some of you, it's porn, and you got to address it. And you can go find my porn project online and watch it. You can watch the next one that's coming up soon. Let me find those for you, just so you can know where they're at. Yeah, there's the porn project. I have both these here. So porn project is March 3rd, and then the Dating for Life is March 17th. And then this is, can I show you that? Yeah. The porn project will be on March 3rd. But these are places that you can begin. And the truth is, there is so many areas you can begin, but here's what you do. You choose one. John Maxwell, and I've ended, I don't know how many talks in my life with this. John Maxwell says, and he's the leadership guru if you don't know. He wrote one of my favorite books called Today Matters. But he says this: when you are challenged by anyone, on anything, so Sunday mornings, small groups, a session like tonight, a YouTube video, he says, find one thing. What is one thing that you can take away? And then he says this, and you have 3 days to do something about it. So it is Wednesday night. If you're watching this, offline or online later, whatever night of the week it is, you have 3 days to do something about it. I would love to hear any thoughts and comments on this talk. I'm really glad you had a chance to come out tonight, and I'd love to hear what your one thing is you're going to do. You can leave it in the comments later, and I'll check it out. And if you have any questions, make sure you find me on social media. As a side note, something I'm challenging people to do is I would hope you would follow, if you go to brettallman.com, all my social media. But I actually hope you do this with lots of people. It's the new thing that I'm doing, because every time, like when I finish with you now, and if I turn on my iPad and look, I want it to be rich content from speakers and pastors and leaders from all over the world on amazing topics. That's where I want the best information in the world brought to me. And so social media is a great way to do that, but it means actually liking different things. And you can find all that on mybrettallman.com. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you so much for joining me for Men Navigating Everything. Hopefully see you in a few weeks for the Porn Project. I'll talk to you soon.